Hey friends, it's Anna and welcome to a very exciting, very cozy, very bookish video. We are going to set up my reading journal for 2025 and I can't wait for you guys to see how pretty and fun these spreads turned out. I'm using this B5 journal from Archer&Olive called In the Attic, and it has this beautiful owl embossed in gold on the cover, sitting on top of some books, so I thought it would be the perfect vibe for a reading journal. Grab some tea or coffee, get cozy, and let's start journaling. I wanted to go ahead and show you guys my mood board and the main supplies I'm using for this setup. So first, these lovely floral stickers from Leela Journals, and then I have some owl and book stickers that I actually printed on my own with my Lean Pixcut sticker maker. I got the digital PNG files from an Etsy shop that sells a bunch of their digital art in this beautiful watercolor style. I'll link that Etsy shop and of course everything else I'm using in the description. Next, I have a variety of washi tape. I'm mainly going to be pulling from this academia set from the washi tape shop. I use this in my reading journal quite often. And then I have a bunch of tapes from a few other sets like my grid set and vintage set. Other miscellaneous supplies for collaging, I have this journal with some beautiful cream paper. I have my old Harry Potter book for some old looking book pages. I also just got these neutral colored sticky notes that have different grid and line patterns, which is perfect for junk journaling. A few silicone stamp sets. I actually only used these once, mainly because they were on the edge of my desk, so I kind of forgot about them. And here's a look at most of the pens and markers I'll be using. As you can see, keeping in tone with this neutral with a hint of pink and red tones palette that I have going with the other supplies. We're going to start off with a title page. We'll come back to the name page at the beginning of the journal later. And I glued those awkward 2 pages in the beginning together on the left, so I didn't have to deal with that one page without the dot grid. This title page is basically just a way to name this as my 2025 reading journal and do some fun collaging. We'll also have a quote on the left side about books, obviously. I'm really excited about that page because the quote comes from a book I'm currently reading, The Covenant of Water, and that book has just been firing off quotable sentences left and right. So that came at a perfect time, right when I needed a quote to start my reading journal. I'm laying out a base collage here with some of the papers and washi tape, and I'm sticking all the paper in with a tape roller. This usually works better than a glue stick in my experience. For most of the titles throughout this setup, I'm actually going to be using my label maker, both to save time on hand lettering, and also I don't get to use this in my journal as often because it does make the pages stick up a little bit. They already do enough with all the collaging going on, but I figured a new journal setup is a good special occasion to whip out this tool, and it's okay if the first pages are a little chunky. This came with a few different colors of label tape, but I went with the black to make it stand out as much as possible. This label paper is really nice because it's already adhesive on the back, so you just peel off that back paper and stick it in. And this adhesive is very strong, which is great, but I also have to make sure I get the placement right because it's very hard to peel back up again. So now that we have the base collage and title placed down, I'm going to come in with some of those stickers. I did print these off as sticker sheets, so each image is already perforated, but I am going to loosely cut them out because I like being able to lay them on the page and test out different placements easily instead of constantly sticking and re-peeling them up again. Because there's an owl on the cover of this journal, I thought it'd be perfect to incorporate owls throughout the initial setup. And owls I feel like are kind of bookish anyways, since they're typically associated with wisdom and knowledge. And then when I found these digital stickers of the owls and saw that the Etsy shop also had the book images with florals, it was just a perfect combo for a reading journal. Also, please ignore those little cuttings of the black label paper near the center. I was totally blind to those until like halfway through the quote page when I finally noticed them and peeled them off. But that will complete our cover page. I'm already loving this dainty vintage feel with the books and owls. Moving over to the left, this will be our quote page. The quote will go, "Fiction is the great lie that tells the truth about how the world works." Again, this is from the book The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. This is a historical fiction novel following several generations of an Indian family who is suffering from a strange affliction where at least one person in every generation dies by drowning. And there was my cat Coco coming in for a quick hello. She loves walking over my journal. But The Covenant of Water has really been a great read so far, even though it's taking me so long to get through because it is a brick of a book. So I'm writing this quote in a few different fonts, a bold serif font, which I'm doing the outline first with a fine liner and then filling in with my Tombow Furunosuke brush pen. I did some of the words in calligraphy and then most in this plain font, also with the brush pen. I'm not going to decorate this page except for adding some little teardrop doodles to kind of frame the quote. I then proceeded to question for at least 15 minutes if I should add a border with this book tape, but I actually kind of liked the clean look of just the quote, and I don't want to just overfill every page, so instead we're going to do that border on these next pages. I love this book tape. It's why I first got that academia set, and I'm sure it will continue to make many appearances in this reading journal. These next two pages are pretty simple. These will be my index or table of contents. I don't tend to need a table of contents when I'm actively using my journals. I can pretty easily flip to any page I need because I spend so much time making these spreads, I know where they all are. But this is mainly in anticipation for this journal being something I'm going to look back on for years to come. I love flipping through my journals. It's such a great keepsake, and maybe 5 years from now I'll want to flip back and see what my thoughts were on a certain book. Maybe I'll be rereading the Mistborn series and I want to see what I wrote the first time I read it, because I am planning on finishing that series in 2025. So by that point it'll be nice to have an index laying out which books are on what pages. This journal has 160 pages, so I divided the spread into 4 columns to give myself plenty of room. I have space for the page number and content labeled at the top. I struggled so much drawing these lines. You saw I had to use whiteout to basically erase some lines I didn't want. And then this third column randomly has 2 lines because I accidentally drew the first one off a square. So I just decided to leave that one because the double line actually looks kind of cute and it's not worth the effort to white it out. I'm using some freebies here that are from Leela Journals. They came with the order that had those monochrome floral stickers and happened to match really well with this setup. And that's my index. I love how these pages look, which is good because if a spread is pretty, I'm more likely to flip back and keep up with it. Next up, we have some staple spreads for my reading journal, but I'm changing up and adding a few things. First, we'll have my 2025 book count, and then on the right page, I'll have my reading goals for the year. I'm making a little collage up top where the title will go. I don't really have any plan when I make these collages. I just pick out a few of my materials, throw them on the page, and tear and rearrange until I think it looks good. Of course, I'm constantly holding washi tape and stickers and everything in different placements before I decide where to finally put it, and repeeling and sticking things as well if I change my mind. It can be a stressful process since I don't go in with a plan, but it can also be very relaxing when you get into the flow, especially with some good music or an audiobook. I'm including this line I specifically tore out from the Harry Potter book, which reads, "See his way along the rows of books." I knew there had to be some good words about books or reading in there, so I went specifically searching for scenes where I knew they would be in the library, and I think it's so charming that the line goes along with the theme of these pages. So getting to the functional part of the spread, like I said, this is my book count to keep track of how many books I read in 2025. I'm drawing out 64 squares, so I guess you could say my goal for next year is to read 64 books. That's around what I read this year. Each square is 2x2 boxes in the journal, and like I said, this is a B5 size journal, so a little bigger than the typical A5 size. I think the B5 measures 10 by 7 inches, and I love having all this space. It gives me plenty of room to decorate each spread. Something new I'm trying this year is adding a color key. So when I finish a book, I'll color in each square, and I'm going to use certain colors for each month. So that way at the end of the year, I'll be able to easily see how much I was reading each month. I'm making the key on this sticky note at the bottom here, and I actually ended up switching to only shades of beige instead of gray. So we're going to replace the sticky note. I've seen lots of people do this online, so this is definitely not my original idea, and I've also seen people do color coding for lots of different things besides the month. Like you could do it by genre or star rating, whatever stat is most interesting. To be completely honest, I chose month because I thought it would look the most aesthetically pleasing at the end of the year because the colors will be grouped together instead of scattered around. And I do have other places in my journal where I track all those other stats. Moving over to the right page, this is for listing a few reading goals for 2025. I'm going to put them on this piece of journal paper, which I'll cut out and then do some decoration around it. I'm also adding a border to this page before putting it in the journal. You'll see in my 25 books for 2025 page, I'll list some specific books I want to get to next year, but this is for more general reading goals. I usually have a few genres or authors or kind of areas of focus I'm excited to get into with my reading, so that's what this page is for. I'm making it a little fun this year by doing a counting up theme, so the goals will be for something to check off 1 through 5 times. My first goal is for 1 month of the year, I want to only read from my physical TBR, aka only books I already own, no buying new books or borrowing from the library. I thought it'd be fun to do a little challenge where for 1 full month I'm only making a dent in all the unread books on my shelves. So that's number 1. Second is reading 2 Christian fiction books. I used to read a lot of this genre, but I don't think I read any at all in 2024, so I want to read some more of those. Next is read 3 nonfiction. I do own a lot of nonfiction that I really want to read, but putting it as a goal is a good motivator to help get me inspired a little bit. Next is read 4 classics, and lastly, complete 5 series. This can be series I start this year or series I'm currently in the middle of, but I want to put an emphasis on finishing series in 2025. And I do have a series tracker spread coming up, which will hopefully help me with this goal. I'm finishing off this page by making a collage around the edges of the goals. We'll see how well I do on these next year. I actually did pretty good with my 2024 reading goals, which you guys will see in my reading journal flip through soon for my 2024 journal. On to the next pages. This left side is the spread I did last year, but on the right is a new layout I'm trying for the first time. So this left page will be my 25 books for 2025. I love how this page ends up looking, but you'll see in a second I made a pretty major mistake involving counting, but we're just going to accept it. I'm making a collage up top again for where the title is, and then I'll print out the covers for the books I want to put here. This spread is basically a 2025 TBR with all the specific books that are highest on my priority or on my radar right now. and I actually decided to only choose 10 books to print off for now. I did the spread in 2024's reading journal and I barely checked off any books, and I feel like that's because I had this big list of books that were on my radar in December and January, but quickly as the months go by, there's new books that pop up and priorities change and tastes change. There are different books that I'm more excited about, and books I was planning on reading I might have moved on from. So my plan is to put 10 books for now that my current self would really like to get to in the first few months of next year. I probably won't have time for all of them, but that's almost always the case for TBRs. And then somewhere in the middle of the year, I'll print out a second batch of book covers that it can include my updated priorities. It's just hard to make a list of books for a full year because I have no idea what I'll want to be reading 6 months from now. I printed all these covers with just my normal printer. I get the cover images from Goodreads and resize them on a Google Doc. These are each 1.4 inches in height, and when you resize these on Google Docs, it automatically adjusts the width. I'm adding little borders to the corners and also putting some rows below to indicate where to put future book covers. And here you can probably notice my mistake. There are only enough borders for 20 books, not 25. I think because there's that one book up top, my brain thought there were 5 total rows, so I only needed to fit 5 books per row. I don't really know what I was thinking, but here we are. I'm not sure if I'm going to try to white out the little corner borders, and I could try to fit 8 and 7 books in those 2 bottom rows to get to 25. That might be too crowded. I'd have to count some squares to see if that would fit. Or I honestly might just leave it because who really cares if it's a list of 25 or 20 books? It's still a fun spread to have. Also, let me know if any of these books are on your list for next year or if you've read any of them. Let me know which ones I should be sure to pick up. I always love hearing recommendations from you guys. You all are really good at giving me the motivation to start certain books. So as you can already see, this next spread is a book bingo. I've seen this one done on lots of reading journals online, but I've never tried it before in mine. It seems like a really fun way to check off random tags or things that apply to the books you read throughout the year. So if you haven't seen this spread before, I'm making a bingo board. So it's going to be 5 by 5 squares, and I did correctly count this time. Each square will have something to do with a book, or there are a few bookish activities I'm going to put on here as well. And then whenever I read a book that applies to that square or do the activity, I can color it in, and I'm aiming to get at least 1 bingo by the end of the year, maybe multiple. I looked up a few reading challenges online for inspiration, and some of these I just thought of myself. I'll read out each one I'm writing here. We have a sci-fi book, a new author to me, historical fiction set in an Eastern country. Almost all the historical fiction I read is in Europe, so I'm trying to branch out a little bit. 1,000+ page book. I'm looking at you, Way of Kings. I'm hoping to start the Stormlight Archive series next year. A book with a mountain on the cover, a book I've never heard anyone talk about before, a light academia book, read in the park, that's one of the activity items, a biography, a debut novel, a book I've owned for 5+ years. I am ashamed at how many unread books sitting on my shelves that probably fall under that category. A horror novel, a book I was gifted, a book with a cat on the cover, read in a cafe, a secondhand book, donate to a free little library, and a book I've previously DNF'd. I'm leaving the last few squares blank on purpose because I'm hoping you guys could give me some ideas to put here. I was running low on interesting prompts at this point, so please comment below any items that you think would be a fun challenge for a book bingo. On to our second to last 2 pages of this setup. I'm going to do another border with this book tape because I really liked how that looked on the index, but this time I'm going to do it across all the pages on top and bottom. Both of these pages will be for my series tracker. The purpose of this is just what it sounds like, to keep track of all the series I'm reading, how many books I have left to go, series I'm discontinuing, all that. I felt like doing something a little different for the title here since everything has been with the label maker so far. So I'm writing out the title in a calligraphy font and I'll tear that out from this piece of paper and paste it in. I've never had a series tracker in my reading journal before because I have typically been a person who, when I start a series, if I like it and plan on reading it all, I'll just read all the books in a row. I won't just stop reading the series with the intention to pick it up in the distant future. But I've been borrowing a lot more books from the library and borrowing a lot more audiobooks as well, to where I might not be able to get the next book right away. And also, when I stopped to think about it, there were several series I have started and not finished currently, so I thought this tracker would be a good idea. Also, there are just so many series on my radar right now that I want to read. It feels like a lot of books I'm excited about for 2025 are series. I really want to read Red Rising soon, Throne of Glass because I read ACOTAR for the first time this year. I just got into Brandon Sanderson's books, so I want to read all his series. So 2025 might just be a year of series, and I'll be happy to have a page to track all my progress with those. Before I start writing out the actual series, I'm making 2 sections on the right page here with the sticky notes. One is for soft DNFs, so if I start a series and I'm open to reading the rest, but I don't think it'll be anytime soon and it's not really a priority, then I'll just list it here instead of tracking it. And then the DNF section is for series I've actively decided I'm not going to continue. The rest of the space on the page is for tracking the series I'm actively reading and wanting to finish. I'm going to use a really simple tracker format, just listing the name of the series and putting boxes below it to represent each book. I might space the boxes differently based on if there's novellas or prequels or special stuff like that. So for Mistborn, for example, I'm drawing 3 boxes for the first trilogy, then a box in the middle because I think there's a novella in the Arcanum that you're supposed to read right there, and then 4 boxes for the next series. I might, if I finish Mistborn and start some of his other series, I might make a whole Cosmere reading chart to track that specifically. I think it'd be fun to make author pages, especially if I'm reading a lot from the same person, and if they have such a complex universe and backlog to read from. So I colored in the boxes for the books I have read. These are all the series that I'm currently reading that I could think of that I do want to finish. And I have plenty of space left to list more series as I start them in 2025. I kind of wish I could write the title of each book next to the boxes, but it seemed like that would take up too much space and it wasn't completely necessary. But if you have a tracker format where you are able to write the book titles out, let me know. If I could figure out a way to include that, I would love to. Now we're moving on to our last 2 pages for this setup. I actually do have a few more beginning of the year pages that I still want to create after this, but by this point I had been filming for a really long time and wanted to take a little break from journaling. So if you guys have any more spread ideas for a reading journal, let me know because I'm still planning on adding some more. And if you'd be interested in watching a part 2 to this setup, seeing even more spread ideas and layouts, let me know that too. I could always film the other spreads I had in mind. Anyways, this left page here will be my 2025 book bracket. I've been doing this ever since starting a reading journal. I originally got the idea from Plant-Based Bride. So this is basically a system to help me pick my favorite book of the year by doing a tournament style bracket for all the books I read. I had so much fun filling this out in 2023, and I'm about to fill it out again for 2024. This is kind of a fun spread to design, although there were a lot of drawing lines. Below the title, I'm going to create a bracket starting with 12 boxes, one for each month. So I'll pick my favorite book that I read for each month, and then those will be the books that we start our bracket with. Then January and February's picks will go head to head, March and April will go head to head, and so on until I've narrowed it down to 6 books, then 3 books, and then finally my top book of 2025. As you can see, I started out with all the vertical lines and then I'm filling in all the horizontal lines to complete the boxes. I made a bigger rectangle for my top book because I'm imagining I'll print out a book cover for that one and paste it in at the end of the year. I'm also going to write a little label, 2025 Best Book, underneath where the cover goes, and then add some of those little decoration ovals that I did on the quote page. I'm going to finish up the bracket by drawing the lines, connecting all the boxes, and also adding some drop shadows. I realize now that I forgot to label the months for the first 12 boxes, but I guess that doesn't really matter. I really like this system to help choose what my favorite book of the year was and just remember some notable reads. It's easier to go about it this way than just thinking of all the dozens of books I've read and just trying to choose one which I liked best from that long list. It's easier to go month by month and choose a favorite and then just compare 2 books at a time. And like I said, filling out this bracket at the end of the year is so much fun. It's something I definitely look forward to. Okay, on to the last spread for this setup. I'm doing a page with all the books I read with my book club in 2025. I have a book club me and my husband do with some of our friends, and it's really nice to have a place where I can look back on all the books we read together. I usually list my ratings as well, so it's fun to see which book club books were my favorites too. I'm doing a similar collage at the top of the page before adding the title. I'm so happy with how this theme turned out. I love the light academia, dainty vintage feel you get with all these collage elements, and I think the book and owl stickers go really well with that and also just match the vibe of a reading journal in general. I'm sure I'll use a lot of these same elements throughout my monthly pages, but I do like to slightly change up the theme of each month's journal entries to match the books I'm reading or the season. But I do stick with this junk journal method and a slightly vintage style throughout the whole journal so it all feels cohesive. The rest of this page is super easy to set up. I'm going to draw those little corner borders to indicate where to paste in book covers. My plan is to print a cover photo for each book we read and paste it in. I'll also write my star rating below each book cover and write the name of the person who picked that book above the cover because we rotate who chooses our collective read. And that's the completed page, so let's do a final flip through of the whole setup. But first, really quick, I forgot to ever come back to the name page, so I'm going to write my name here and then just add a few strips of washi tape so we can finish that page as well. Again, I love how all these spreads turned out, and I'm so excited for another year of tracking my reading. Reading has been one of my main hobbies since I was a child, and I love geeking out over book stats and keeping track of reading goals and all that stuff. I really think this is my favorite journal that I keep. Again, let me know any other spread ideas you have for me or ideas for that book bingo, and feel free to subscribe if you want to stick around for more journal and book content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and happy reading in the new year.